Hi, Lark Galley here to talk about grief in the workplace. And this is specifically how it affects employees, which could be most of us. And as I have been putting out a survey for employees to talk about grief in the workplace, I've been getting back several responses. The majority of these responses are is that the grief that they experienced was due to the death of a loved one. However, the grief that we experience in life is not always due to the death of someone we care about. It can come from a divorce or from the diagnosis of a terminal illness in ourselves or in a family member. It can come from something as wonderful as graduating from something or changing, moving. These are things that create change in our lives and affect, and can allow some grief. I know that when we recently moved, there was some grief I experienced because I was saying goodbye to a lot of my neighbors and friends that I'd known for many years. And so there was a grief associated with that. So, the grief I specifically want to talk today about and what we as employers can do to be more considerate of grief and understanding what people might go through during times of grief. The story that I heard was from a young woman. She was in her mid 20s, and her mother received an unexpected diagnosis of terminal illness, completely out of the blue. And within 6 weeks, her mother had passed away. Now, 25, relatively young to lose a parent, especially unexpectedly. And so this young woman was dealing with the grief of, first of all, her mother was dying, had very short time left to live. That's first of all. And then the mother did die. And then on top of that, a lot of times we get about 3 days for the death of a loved one. Well, if you've ever gone through any kind of grief processing, I will tell you right now, 3 days does not even begin to come close to scratching the surface in being able to deal with the grief that manifests itself. It can take months, years, and still it can be there and affect us at different times. So this young woman was on a team that was putting together some deals, and her employer was wanting to close this big deal. And they were really pushing this young woman, hey, we know you're grieving, but you need to come in here. You need to be part of this team. You need to help close this deal. We're counting on you. They put a lot of pressure on her. And for someone who's gone through a serious grief situation, I can tell you right now that if you're in a grief situation, a lot of times you can barely show up. You're not going to show up at 100%. And I've even heard people say to others who are grieving, hey, we want the old you back. Or why can't you just put your big girl pants on and show up? Well, I will tell you, because sometimes there is no motivation there. There's just such an empty hole that the idea of even going on just doesn't even seem comprehensible at sometimes. So, of course, this young woman tried to do her very best. She showed up as best she could, and within a very short amount of time after this situation with her employer, she left because she just did not feel that the employer gave her the space to grieve or to recover or to recognize that she was in deep emotional pain and needed more support. On the employer side, I can appreciate that we're, all about getting profits and having a reason to continue with the company. But what I feel is that this company lost a good employee because they failed to recognize the humanness of employees in understanding that she needed a space to heal, and that she could only perform at a certain level, but that over time, given space and time, she would be able to come back somewhat to her earlier self. I don't know that she would ever come back 100%, and I'm quite certain that her priorities and things that she felt was most important would have changed. And so as an employer, we can look at our employees and say, when they've gone through a grief situation, their motivation factor for coming into work might not exist. I mean, sure, they probably enjoy eating and having a roof over their head, but the push for profits or closing that next sale, that might not be as important to them as truly connecting with the customer and making sure the customer is supported. So there are alternative ways that we as a company can benefit from having an employee who's very tuned in to, I'm going to call it higher priorities and helping people feel that they're seen and heard. So if you are someone who has experienced some grief, trauma, whatever it was, and it impacted your work, I would love for you to fill out my survey. It'll just take you a couple minutes and let me know your experience in the workplace. And I will put the link for that in the comments on this post. Thanks so much.